The Vanishing Threads of 1413 Bluebell Lane. It started like any other uneventful evening. I was scrolling through Reddit, a typical lurker in the r/unsolved mysteries subreddit, when a peculiar thread caught my attention. The post, titled "Strange Disappearances at 1413, Bluebell Lane," stood out not because of its upvotes but because it had 0 comments despite being posted 2 days ago. That's practically unheard of in such an active community. The original poster, who went by the username Echoed Silence, described an eerie phenomenon: anyone who spent the night in the house at 1413, Bluebell Lane disappeared without a trace. The house, according to them, was locally infamous in a small rural town in Maine. What struck me the most was the detail. Their post included pictures of the house, police reports, and even testimonies from residents. The house was an old Victorian with peeling gray paint and broken windows that gave it the cliché, haunted, appearance. It had been abandoned for over 3 decades, yet its electricity still worked. Locals claimed to see lights flicker in the attic at night. The poster's final remark was chilling: "I'm spending the night there tomorrow. If I don't update, you know what happened." I bookmarked the thread, planning to check back the next day. But something about it lingered in my mind. Who would willingly spend the night in a place with such a reputation? Against my better judgment, I decided to send Echoed Silence a message. "Hey, saw your post about 1413, Bluebell Lane. Are you sure about this? Sounds dangerous." I didn't expect a response, but about an hour later, a reply came: "I'm already here. It's quiet, too quiet. But I'll be fine. I'll update in the morning." That was the last I ever heard from them. The next day, the thread was gone. Not deleted by the mods, but completely erased, as if it had never existed. My messages to Echoed Silence remained unanswered, and their account had been suspended. Feeling uneasy, I searched for 1413, Bluebell Lane online. To my surprise, the house was real, and the stories matched the post: dozens of disappearances over the decades, all unsolved. A morbid curiosity took hold of me. I had to see it for myself. I drove to the town the following weekend. Bluebell Lane was just as described: quiet, almost unnervingly so. The house stood at the end of a cul-de-sac, shrouded by overgrown trees. The air around it felt heavy, oppressive, as if the atmosphere itself resisted my presence. I parked my car a block away and walked to the property. The gate creaked open on its own, though there was no wind. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I pushed forward, drawn by an inexplicable force. The inside was worse than the exterior. The air smelled of mildew and something metallic, like blood. The furniture was covered in dusty sheets, but the outline of handprints marred the surfaces. The walls were lined with faded portraits of a family whose eyes seemed to follow me. I set up my phone to record everything. At first, nothing happened. Hours passed as I sat in the living room, listening to the groans of the old house. But at midnight, the atmosphere shifted. The temperature plummeted, and my breath fogged in the air. A faint sound echoed from upstairs, a whisper, so soft it could have been imagined. Gathering my courage, I climbed the staircase. The whispers grew louder, forming indistinct words. They led me to the attic. The attic door was ajar, revealing a dimly lit space. A single light bulb swung from the ceiling, casting unsettling shadows. In the center of the room stood a mirror, its surface rippling like water. As I approached, my reflection didn't match my movements. It smiled when I didn't. "Welcome," it whispered in my voice. Before I could react, the mirror's surface erupted, tendrils of darkness snaking out and pulling me in. I screamed, clawing at the floor, but the force was too strong. When I woke up, I was in the same attic, but everything had changed. The house was pristine, filled with the sounds of laughter and music. A family I didn't recognize sat in the living room below, their faces eerily familiar. They were the people from the portraits. I tried to leave, but the house wouldn't let me. Every door led back inside. The windows showed only darkness, no matter the time of day. I found my phone, but all it displayed was a single message: "You're home now." That was months ago. I don't know how long exactly, time doesn't work the same here. I've posted this using the house's connection to the internet, hoping someone will see it. If you're reading this, stay away from 1413 Bluebell Lane, and if you hear whispers at night, don't follow them. You might not come back. The Shadows Beneath Ravenwood Asylum. When I was 23, I worked as a freelance photographer, taking odd jobs to make ends meet. One day, a wealthy client contacted me with a peculiar request. He wanted me to document the interior of Ravenwood Asylum, an abandoned psychiatric hospital, for a book he was writing. He offered an absurd amount of money, enough to make me ignore my gut feeling that screamed, "Don't go." Ravenwood had been closed for decades after a fire gutted most of the main building. Rumors about its dark history ran rampant: unethical experiments, patient disappearances, and a head doctor who allegedly went insane before the fire. Locals avoided it, swearing they'd seen lights in its windows at night and heard faint screams carried on the wind. The client insisted I go alone. "I want the atmosphere untouched," he said. Reluctantly, I agreed and packed my camera gear. On a dreary November morning, I arrived at Ravenwood. The asylum loomed against the gray sky, its silhouette jagged and foreboding. Ivy climbed its cracked walls, and broken windows gaped like empty eye sockets. Inside, the air was thick with decay. Every step echoed unnaturally, as if the building were mimicking my movements. The first few hours were uneventful. I photographed peeling wallpaper, rusted gurneys, and graffiti scrawled by past trespassers. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, the atmosphere shifted. I was in the eastern wing when I heard it, a faint whisper, like a breathless voice calling my name. My stomach nodded, but I brushed it off as my imagination. Then it came again, clearer this time: "Leave." I froze, my heart hammering. The hallway ahead seemed darker than before, the shadows deeper. I turned to leave, but the door I'd entered through was gone. In its place was a solid wall, the plaster seamless as if no door had ever been there. Panic clawed at my chest. I bolted down the hall, my flashlight trembling in my grip. The whispers grew louder, morphing into a cacophony of voices. They overlapped, each distinct yet unintelligible. I reached a stairwell and descended, hoping to find another exit. Instead, I found the basement. The air was colder here, and the smell of mildew was overpowering. My flashlight flickered, its beam cutting through the darkness in stuttering bursts. The basement was a maze of corridors and rooms filled with rusted medical equipment. In one room, I found a table with leather straps and a blood-stained saw. As I took a photo, my camera's flash revealed something behind me in the reflection of a broken mirror, a figure standing in the doorway. It was tall and gaunt, its face obscured by shadow. I spun around, but no one was there. The whispers had stopped, replaced by a deafening silence. I tried to retrace my steps, but the layout of the basement seemed to change. Corridors that should have led back to the stairwell twisted into unfamiliar paths. My phone had no signal, and the battery drained faster than it should have. In one hallway, I saw a door slightly ajar, warm light spilling out. Desperate, I pushed it open. Inside was a makeshift office. Papers littered the desk, many of them patient files. One name caught my eye: Alan Fisher, my client. According to the file, he had been a patient at Ravenwood, admitted for severe paranoia and delusions. Scribbled across the margins were notes: claims to see shadows, talks to unseen entities, and believes he will be trapped here forever. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Alan Fisher wasn't a writer, he was a victim of this place. I was his replacement. The room's light flickered, and the air grew heavy. A low growl rumbled from the hallway, followed by the sound of dragging footsteps. I backed into a corner, clutching my flashlight like a weapon. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. A guttural voice spoke, low and rasping, "Join us." The door slammed shut, plunging the room into darkness. My flashlight died, leaving me blind. Something cold brushed against my arm, and I screamed, flailing wildly. When the light returned, I was alone, but the papers were gone, and the room was empty. I don't remember how I escaped. The next thing I knew, I was stumbling out into the cold dawn, my camera bag still slung over my shoulder. My car was parked exactly where I'd left it, but the tires were covered in frost, as if I'd been gone for days. I drove home in a daze, vowing never to return. When I reviewed the photos later, most were corrupted, filled with static and distortions. But one image sent chills down my spine: a group of shadowy figures standing in a circle, their hollow eyes staring straight at the camera. In the center was a man who looked just like Alan Fisher, his face twisted in a silent scream. I've tried to contact Alan, but his email bounces back, and his phone number is disconnected. Ravenwood Asylum was demolished a month later, though no one seems to know who ordered it. Sometimes, late at night, I hear whispers outside my apartment. They're faint but persistent, always saying the same thing: "Join us."